You ever feel like peace is just too quiet? Like it's almost waiting for something to go wrong? I found that out the hard way. My name's Rose Hamilton, and if you stay with me, you'll understand how a night that seemed perfect turned into the moment I lost everything. It was a Friday evening, and the kind of quiet that made you feel guilty for being happy. My husband, Peter, had just wrapped up a huge deal that secured his place in the business world. $8 million. All of it was finally in the bag. His company, a logistics empire he'd built from the ground up, was about to cross a new threshold. The deal had been years in the making, and that night, it felt like we'd hit the top. We celebrated over dinner, laughing about old memories. Peter made fun of my terrible cooking skills, and I teased him about his obsession with our golden retriever. The air was light, free of stress. It was just us. After dessert, Peter leaned back in his chair, his face softened with that familiar look, the one that told me he was about to say something important. "Rose, I need you to do something for me," he said, his voice steady. I looked at him, setting my fork down. "Anything, darling. What's up?" "Transfer everything into your name," he said, almost nonchalant. "All of it? The company accounts?" I asked, blinking. He didn't answer immediately, but kept his eyes on me. "All of it. The company, the investments, everything. Just to be safe." "Safe from what?" I asked, laughter fading from my voice. Peter reached across the table and placed his hand on mine. "It's not panic, Rose. It's just precaution. Things at the office have been shifting. I trust you to keep things steady if anything goes wrong." The word "if" hung in the air longer than I expected. Peter had been through a lot since his mild heart attack 3 years ago, and I knew he was careful. I didn't press him, though, even though something in my gut told me I should. "Okay," I said, forcing a smile. "I'll do it first thing tomorrow." Peter smiled and poured more wine, the glasses glinting in the amber light of the dining room. We danced, just like we used to when we were younger. The floor felt cool beneath my bare feet, and for a few moments, time seemed to stop. I didn't want to let go of the moment. The next morning, I did exactly what Peter asked, transferred everything. Bank confirmation, signed documents, everything. I sent him a text with the receipt, the image followed by a heart emoji. He replied with a thumbs up. Nothing more. By Sunday afternoon, my phone rang. "Mrs. Hamilton?" The voice on the other end was calm, professional. "This is County General Hospital. Your husband's been brought in. You should come quickly." My coffee mug slipped from my hand before I even realized it. How fast can peace turn into a nightmare? I don't know if you've ever had one of those days that starts with laughter and ends with nothing but confusion. That's how it felt when the hospital called. The whole morning had felt normal, almost too normal. Sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, bouncing off the countertops, casting that warm glow I loved. It almost felt like I could breathe freely again after the chaos of the past few weeks. Peter's deal was done. We were safe. That's what I kept telling myself. When he left that morning, I kissed him goodbye like I always did, with a soft promise. "See you tonight, sweetheart." But I never saw him again. I spent most of the day doing what I always do, running errands, cleaning up, organizing the house, the kind of chores that fill the silence, the kind of chores that keep you from thinking too much. The news was on in the background, but I barely registered it. By afternoon, the housekeeper, Lucy, came by to drop off the dry cleaning. She seemed a little hesitant, hanging back by the door. "Mrs. Hamilton," she started, "I stopped by the office earlier to drop off the ledgers, and Mr. Peter was upset." I frowned. Upset? About what? Lucy hesitated, her eyes flicking to the floor before meeting mine again. I didn't mean to overhear, but I heard him saying something strange. He told someone on the phone, "You're not ready for that, Miles." Then he said, "No." I didn't catch the rest of it because he slammed the door. Miles, our son. I hadn't heard Peter mention Miles in that tone before. Usually, he was the proud father, always encouraging him, always looking for ways to keep him involved. But the way Lucy described the exchange, something felt off. I told myself it was just business, maybe a father-son disagreement, something work-related. But deep down, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling in my gut. I didn't ask Peter about it when he texted me later, telling me he'd be late. The text was casual, light. "Save me some dinner," he wrote, and I did. But by the time I sat down to eat alone, I couldn't stop thinking about what Lucy had said. Sunday morning came, and Peter's office was still quiet. I made breakfast, but there was a strange weight in the air. His things were scattered around the house, his jacket by the door, his keys on the kitchen counter, his favorite watch sitting on the nightstand. It was the little things, the things that should have felt normal, but instead felt off. Around noon, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't a friendly text or a casual update. It was the hospital. "Mrs. Hamilton, your husband has collapsed. We need you to come immediately." I froze. My coffee cup, still sitting on the counter, had been forgotten in the chaos that followed. My heart raced, a million thoughts crashing into one another. How could this be happening? Just hours ago, we'd been talking about everything and nothing, laughing like there was nothing to fear. I rushed to the hospital, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. When I arrived, everything felt wrong. The lights were too bright, the sterile air too cold. I wasn't prepared for what I saw when I walked into that room. Peter lay there, unresponsive, the machines around him eerily silent. For a moment, I thought I had walked into the wrong room. Peter, my strong, determined husband, couldn't possibly be lying there like that. But there he was, pale and still, surrounded by nothing but empty space. The doctor, a stranger with sad eyes, stepped forward, speaking words that didn't make sense. "Mrs. Hamilton, your husband suffered a heart attack. He passed before we could do anything." A heart attack? How? Why? The questions surged through me like a tidal wave, but I couldn't find the words. The world tilted under me, and for the first time in years, I felt completely and utterly alone. You ever wonder how one phone call can change everything? How your whole world can tilt off its axis, and you don't even realize it until it's too late? That's what happened to me when the doctor said Peter was gone. I didn't hear the words at first, didn't want to hear them. I just stood there, frozen, staring at him. My husband, the man who had built our lives, our legacy with his own two hands, gone. I stayed in that sterile room for what felt like hours, waiting for someone to tell me this was a mistake, that it wasn't true. But the longer I sat there, the more I realized it was true. Peter was gone, and my world was falling apart faster than I could hold it together. Hours later, when I was finally able to leave the hospital, the rain had started falling in sheets. I didn't know where I was going or even what I was doing. I just knew I had to get away from the place where everything had fallen apart. The drive home was a blur, the headlights from passing cars dancing across the wet streets. And my thoughts? Well, my thoughts were a mess. How had everything gone so wrong? By the time I made it home, the house was eerily quiet. Too quiet. It felt like it was waiting for something, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I walked through the front door, still in shock, still feeling the weight of the day pressing down on me. That's when I noticed the message on my phone, a text from Peter, sent earlier that morning. "I'll be late. Love you. Save me some dinner." I read it 3 times, 4 times. I couldn't stop staring at it. The same words that had felt so casual, so normal when I first read them, now felt like a cruel joke. He was gone, and I was here, alone. I didn't have time to wallow in the grief, not yet. There was something else gnawing at me, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. I started to go through the house, checking the messages, the things Peter had left behind. His desk was still in perfect order, his papers neatly stacked, but there was one thing I hadn't noticed before, a piece of paper tucked into the back of his calendar. It was handwritten, and the words weren't his. I pulled it out, reading the note, my hands trembling as I did. It was a message from his lawyer, Mr. Alden. It said, "Make sure she doesn't know. The company is already in jeopardy. Do whatever it takes to protect it." I blinked, rereading the words over and over. It didn't make sense. What was Peter protecting? What had he been involved in that would require this kind of secrecy? My stomach turned. I felt sick, like I was unraveling a thread that didn't belong to me. I put the paper down and walked to the living room, where I saw a few more papers scattered on the coffee table. One of them was a copy of a recent bank statement. It was the company account, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The transfer, the large transfer, to my account. I'd done what Peter asked, but now I realized I hadn't asked the right questions. Why had he been so insistent? Why hadn't I known about these transfers? It was all starting to feel planned, too planned. I sat down, my mind racing. Why didn't Peter tell me everything? Why had he kept me in the dark? And why was there a lawyer involved trying to cover up something? I looked down at my phone again, this time seeing a call from Miles, our son. I hadn't spoken to him in hours, not since the hospital. I pressed the button to answer, my heart pounding. "Mom, we need to talk about Dad's accounts," Miles said, his voice oddly cold, emotionless. I felt a chill run down my spine. It didn't sound like a son who had just lost his father. It sounded like someone with an agenda. "Now?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, now. I'll be at the house in an hour. We have to figure this out, Mom." I hung up without saying goodbye. The room felt smaller, suffocating. I knew something wasn't right, but I had no idea how deep the lies ran. And so, I waited. You ever get the feeling you've been playing someone else's game, but you didn't know the rules until it was too late? That's what happened when Miles showed up at the house. I wasn't ready for it. I don't think I'll ever be ready for it. When he walked through the door, his face was as unreadable as a wall. He didn't even look like he'd just lost his father. He walked in like he was walking into an office meeting, not a home where we should have been grieving together. "Mom," he started, his voice as flat as I'd ever heard it. "We need to go over Dad's estate, the accounts, the transfers, everything. We need to make sure things are handled properly." I blinked, the air thick with confusion. "Miles, I just lost your father. Can we not do this right now?" But he didn't even flinch. His eyes never wavered from mine. "We have to, Mom. If we don't, it could get messy." I couldn't breathe. It felt like the floor had dropped beneath me. Messy? It wasn't just about a messy situation. It was about the way he was talking, like he was already planning for something, already making decisions without ever considering how I might feel. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered, the words tasting like betrayal in my mouth. "Look, I'm just trying to protect what's left," he said, his tone still too calm, too rehearsed. "I need to make sure everything's in order. I know what's at stake." At that moment, I wanted to scream, to tell him that I was the one who had lost everything, not just Peter, but now I was losing my son, too. This wasn't about a cold transaction. It was about family. Or at least it should have been. "Is this really about Dad's estate, or is it about you?" I finally asked, the question hanging in the air like smoke. Because right now, it feels like you're more interested in taking control than grieving. Miles didn't respond right away. He shifted his weight, almost like he was uncomfortable with what I said. But then he took a deep breath, his face still unreadable. "I'm trying to protect you, Mom," he said. "I'm trying to protect us all." The way he said it made my skin crawl. This wasn't about protection. This was about him positioning himself. He wasn't my son anymore. He was a stranger in a suit, standing in my living room like he owned the place. "Protection?" I whispered. "By freezing my access to everything we've built? By questioning Dad's last request?" That's when it hit me. This wasn't just about securing the future. This was about control. And Miles had already decided he was the one who would take it. But I couldn't let him. Not now. Not when I was beginning to see the truth that Peter had tried to warn me about. "Mom," Miles continued, cutting into my thoughts, "we don't have much time. We need to make sure the transfer of assets is legit. The lawyer's waiting." Lawyer? My blood ran cold. It wasn't just business, was it? He had someone on the outside, too. This wasn't about securing anything for the family. It was about lining up his own interests, and everyone else be damned. I won't sign anything until I know what happened to your father, I said, my voice shaking but firm. Miles looked at me like I was crazy. Mom, we don't have that luxury. I took a step back, my heart pounding. Something wasn't adding up. The way Miles was acting, the lawyer's sudden involvement, they'd been planning this, even before Peter's death. You're trying to take everything, I said softly, the words barely escaping my lips. He didn't deny it. Instead, he just stared at me, his face hardening. I'm doing what's best for this family, he said, though I could hear the lie in his voice. For the first time since I lost Peter, I understood. Miles had made a choice. He wasn't just my son anymore. He was the man who wanted to own everything Peter had worked for, and he was willing to do whatever it took to make that happen. I backed away from him slowly, my heart beating faster than I could keep up with. I want you out of my house, I said, my voice cold and steady, and I want you to leave me alone until you can find your humanity again. You ever realize too late that you were looking in the wrong direction the whole time? I thought Miles was the biggest threat. I thought if I could just keep him out of the house, out of the business, I could protect Peter's legacy. But sometimes the real danger is closer than you think. It wasn't just Miles. It wasn't just the business. It was everything. After Miles left, I stood there, staring at the door he had just walked out of. His footsteps echoed in the silence, like a warning that I couldn't ignore. He'd said he was doing what was best for the family, but the truth was, he was doing what was best for him. I could feel it in every word, every cold tone. And I knew something else, something far more dangerous. He wasn't the only one with secrets. Later that night, after the house had settled back into its eerie quiet, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the rooms, trying to calm my racing thoughts. Everything felt wrong. Every corner of the house seemed to echo with memories that weren't mine anymore. I walked past Peter's study and stopped dead in my tracks. The door was slightly ajar, as if inviting me to come in. Something about it caught my attention, like a pull I couldn't resist. I hesitated for a moment, but then I stepped inside. The desk was exactly as Peter had left it. The papers were stacked neatly, his pen still resting beside an old leather-bound notebook. Everything was in place, as if time had stood still in this room. But there was something off. A faint smell of his cologne lingered, mixing with the scent of cedar and dust. I sat down in Peter's chair, my hands resting on the cold wood of the desk. I had never felt so alone. The weight of the last few days, of Peter's death, of Miles's betrayal, was crashing down on me. I had to know what Peter was trying to protect. I had to know what he had left me, in case something happened. I leaned forward and opened the drawer. There, tucked away behind a stack of folders, was an envelope. No name on it, just a single word written in Peter's unmistakable handwriting. Rose. I opened it slowly, my hands trembling. Inside was a letter, crisp and folded, with the same familiar handwriting that had once comforted me, now haunting me with its truth. Rose, if you're reading this, then I'm not here. You know what's been happening. You know the danger we're in. I've left everything to you because I trust you. I need you to protect what we've built. There are things you don't know about Miles, things you need to understand before it's too late. I swallowed hard, my throat tightening as I read on. He's been making deals behind your back. There are people involved, people you wouldn't believe. I tried to shield you, tried to keep you safe. But you need to know what he's done, and you need to act fast. Don't trust anyone, not even me. My mind raced, the words blurring together. I couldn't believe what I was reading. Peter had known. He had known something about Miles, something so dark that he had been preparing for this moment. But why hadn't he told me? Why had he kept me in the dark? I set the letter down, my hands shaking. I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. This wasn't just about protecting the estate, it was about protecting us, the family he had built, the legacy that was now falling apart. And Peter had known all along that Miles was already scheming to take it all. But what had Peter seen in his son that made him act so fast? Why hadn't I noticed the cracks forming in our family? I couldn't stay in that room anymore. I couldn't breathe. The house, the memories, they all felt too heavy. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I grabbed my coat and ran to the car. The rain had started again, cold and relentless, as if the sky itself was mourning what had been lost. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to find out the truth. I had to find out what Miles had been doing, and what he would do next. As I drove through the night, the world outside seemed to blur. The streets, the buildings, the lights, they all passed in a haze. My thoughts were too loud, too sharp. The letter was burning in my mind, but it wasn't enough. I needed more. I needed to confront Miles. I needed him to explain everything, even if it tore us apart. And when I finally reached my destination, I knew it wouldn't be just a conversation. It would be the start of everything unraveling. There are moments in life that hit you like a punch to the gut, when everything you thought was solid, everything you held close, starts to crack open. That was what this was. The moment I realized I wasn't just dealing with my son's betrayal. I was standing at the edge of a cliff, and the ground beneath me was crumbling. I arrived at Miles's apartment just after midnight. The rain had intensified, turning the city streets into rivers of flashing lights and reflections. I parked a block away, taking a deep breath before stepping out into the cold, my thoughts racing with every step I took. The letter Peter left me weighed heavily in my pocket, a constant reminder of everything that had been hidden from me. I rang the doorbell, my heart pounding in my chest. It felt surreal, like I was walking into a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. When the door finally opened, Miles stood there, his face unreadable, his posture stiff. "Mom?" he said, his voice flat, like he was trying to play the part of a son, but I could see the cracks in his facade. "What are you doing here?" I didn't give him a chance to speak again. "We need to talk," I said, pushing past him into the apartment. It was quiet. Too quiet. The lights were dim, and I could hear the faint hum of the city through the windows. But something in the air felt off, like I was walking into a trap that had been set up long ago. Miles didn't stop me as I walked into the living room. He stood in the doorway, watching me, his expression guarded. I turned to face him, my voice steady but laced with anger. "What's going on, Miles? What's really going on?" He hesitated, his eyes flicking to the side, like he was trying to find the right words, or maybe the right excuse. "What are you talking about, Mom? You know how much Dad meant to me. I'm just trying to handle things the right way. You've always told me to do what's best for the family, haven't you?" I could feel the blood rising in my cheeks. This isn't about doing what's best for the family, Miles. This is about you taking control of everything your father built. You've been planning this for months, hasn't you? The transfers, the lawyer, you've been setting me up as the fall guy, haven't you? His face faltered for a second. It was a tiny slip, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. Then he closed himself off again, his jaw tightening. "I'm not setting you up, Mom," he said, but the lie was clear in his eyes. "I'm trying to protect us, protect the company, everything Dad worked for." "You mean everything you want, don't you?" I shot back, my words cutting like a knife. "You've been in on this from the start, haven't you? You knew about the shell accounts. You knew about the misdirected funds. You've been playing me and playing Peter. And now you think you can take everything?" Miles didn't answer. He didn't have to. His silence was enough. I took a step forward, my voice low but laced with anger. "Peter wasn't stupid, Miles. He knew exactly what you were doing. That's why he had me make those transfers. He was protecting me, protecting the only thing he cared about, me." The room was silent for a moment, except for the soft ticking of a clock in the background. Miles was staring at me, his fists clenched at his sides. I didn't want this, Mom, he finally said, his voice softer now, but there was no remorse in it. I didn't want Dad to die, but now everything's on me. I need to make sure it's all handled right. I need to protect what's mine. The words hit me like a slap across the face. It wasn't about the company. It wasn't about the family. It was about him. And when I realized that, something inside me snapped. No, Miles, I said, my voice rising now. You don't get to take everything. You don't get to rewrite your father's life for your own gain. Not on my watch. I could see the anger flicker in his eyes, but there was something else there too, fear. For the first time since Peter's death, I saw it. Miles was afraid, and that fear, for whatever reason, made him dangerous. You're not taking control, I said, stepping closer to him. You don't get to control what happens to this family. Peter trusted me to protect everything, and I'm going to do just that. Miles stepped back, his hands still clenched, his breathing heavy. But instead of speaking, he just looked at me like I was some kind of enemy. And in that moment, I realized he was no longer my son. Not the one I'd raised, not the one I'd loved. He was someone else entirely. And I wasn't going to let him destroy everything Peter had built. I turned to leave, my mind made up. There was no going back now. The pieces were already in motion. But as I reached for the door, I heard his voice again, low and dangerous. You won't win, Mom, he said. You don't know what you're up against. I didn't answer him. I just walked out. The rain had stopped, and for the first time in days, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. But I wasn't going to lose to my own flesh and blood. You ever get to the point where you realize the person you thought you knew is gone, replaced by someone unrecognizable? That's where I was now, with Miles. The son I had raised, the boy who used to sit on my lap and ask about his future, was now a stranger, standing in the middle of a storm I didn't even know was brewing. The next few days felt like a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and legal threats. Miles wasn't backing down. He'd made his move, and now it was a game of survival. The lawyer, Mr. Alden, continued to send me paperwork, each one more complex than the last. Every document was a reminder of the battle I was now fighting, not just for the estate, but for everything Peter and I had built together. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the people who had been close to Peter. The employees who had been with us for years, the ones who said they were loyal, they started to shift. The emails were filled with questions about the estate, about the transfers, about the future of the company. Some were kind, some were accusing, but none of them felt real. That was the hardest part, realizing that Peter's death had opened doors I couldn't close. There were people I thought I could trust, people who had known Peter as long as I had, and now they were all walking on eggshells, afraid to choose a side. I couldn't blame them. They knew what was at stake. But I couldn't stay in limbo. I had to act, and I had to act fast. One evening, I sat down with Mr. Lell, Peter's longtime lawyer. He had been with us for years, through thick and thin, and even though he hadn't said it outright, I could see the concern in his eyes. "We need to get ahead of this, Mrs. Hamilton," he said, his voice grave. "Miles has already started the process of contesting the estate. He's not going to let it go quietly. And if we don't move fast, he could get his hands on everything. Not just the money, but the company, the assets." "I know," I said, feeling the weight of the words. "But how? How do we stop him?" Lell looked at me for a long time before responding. "We need to get the documents in order. The ones your husband left. The ones that show the transfers were his decision and that they were done legally. We can fight this in court, but we need irrefutable proof." I nodded, understanding the urgency. If Miles was going to contest everything, we had to have all our bases covered. But that meant one thing: going through Peter's files, his private documents, the ones that had been hidden away. The next day, I took the folder Peter had left me, the one with his handwriting on it, and went through everything he had left behind. There were notes, legal documents, even phone records, but nothing prepared me for what I found next. At the very back of the folder was a contract, a signed agreement that I had never seen before. It was for a loan that Peter had taken out against the company's assets. It was a loan that had never been discussed with me, and the terms, they were heavily in favor of one person, Miles. I felt a cold wave wash over me. Peter had trusted me. He had always been open with me about our finances, about the business. So why hadn't he told me about this loan? Why had he kept it from me, especially when he knew how important the company's future was? I went through the contract again, my heart pounding in my chest. It was clear now that Peter had known what was coming. He had known that something or someone was going to try to take everything away from us. I closed the folder and sat back in the chair, my mind racing. This was bigger than I had realized. Miles wasn't just trying to take control of the company. He was trying to take everything Peter and I had worked for. And if he got his hands on it, there would be nothing left for anyone. I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let Peter's legacy be stolen by my own son. The next step was clear. I had to confront Miles. This wasn't about business anymore. This was about family, about everything Peter had built, and I was the only one left who could protect it. You ever feel like the weight of the world is on your shoulders and you have to make one last decision that changes everything? That's where I was now, standing at the edge of it all. The truth was staring me in the face, and there was no more running from it. I had the proof now. The documents Peter had left behind were clear, irrefutable. The loan Miles had taken out against the company was a ticking time bomb, one that would have buried us all if I didn't act. But the real bombshell wasn't in the contract. It was in the way Peter had set it all up. Peter knew. He had known that Miles would go this far. He had been preparing for it. And he had left me the means to stop it, to protect everything we had built. But the question lingered. Could I actually do it? I didn't hesitate for long. I had no choice now. I had to confront Miles. It wasn't just about the estate. It wasn't just about the company. It was about my son. My son. And the decisions he'd made, the lies he'd told, the betrayal he had orchestrated. I called him. My hands shook as I dialed his number, the phone cold against my ear. "Miles," I said when he picked up, "we need to talk." His voice was cautious, like he wasn't sure what I knew. "What about, Mom?" "Meet me at Peter's office, now," I said, my voice tight. "I'm done waiting." There was a long pause on the other end, and for a second, I thought he might hang up. But then I heard him sigh. "Fine, I'll be there." The drive to the office was short, but it felt like the longest journey of my life. Every thought, every piece of evidence, every word we had ever said to each other swirled in my mind. I wasn't just facing a business deal anymore. I was facing my own blood. And the truth was, I wasn't sure if I could come back from this. When I arrived, I didn't wait long. Miles showed up not long after, his face tight with frustration and something else, something cold. I could see it in his eyes. He was losing control, and he knew it. He didn't speak as he walked into the office. I followed him inside, the door shutting behind us with a soft thud. The air in the room was thick with tension, heavier than it had ever been before. This wasn't about business anymore. This was about family, and I wasn't about to let him destroy it. "Miles," I began, my voice steady but firm, "you've been playing a dangerous game, and now it's time to face the consequences." He crossed his arms, his expression unreadable. "What are you talking about, Mom?" I held up the folder, the one Peter had left me, the one with all the answers. "You thought I wouldn't find out. You thought you could take everything. But I have the proof now, Miles. I know about the loan, about the misappropriated funds, and I know what you've been doing behind my back." His eyes flickered. For the first time, I saw fear. Real fear. "This isn't what you think," he said quickly, his voice rising. "I was just trying to protect us. You don't understand, Mom. I'm doing what's best for the family." I shook my head. "No, Miles, you're doing what's best for you. You've been lying to me, lying to Peter. This isn't about protecting the family. This is about you taking everything for yourself." He stepped forward, his fists clenched, but I didn't back down. "You have no idea what it's like," he spat. "You don't know what it's like to have to take control, to have everyone rely on you. You've always had everything handed to you. I've had to fight for every damn thing." I stood my ground. Fighting doesn't mean lying, Miles. It doesn't mean betraying your own father. Peter trusted me to protect everything he worked for, and I'm not going to let you destroy it. His face twisted in frustration, but there was something else there too. Guilt. Just for a second, I saw it, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. "You think you can stop me? You think you can control this?" he snarled. "I'm already in too deep. It's over, Mom." I reached into my coat pocket, pulling out the final piece of the puzzle, the letter Peter had written to me, the one he'd left behind just in case. I handed it to him without saying a word. He looked at it, his eyes scanning the words, and for a moment, he seemed to freeze. The color drained from his face, and I knew he understood now. He understood that this was bigger than him, bigger than everything he had planned. "Peter knew," I said softly, watching his face as the realization hit him. "He knew what you were doing. That's why he made sure I had the power to stop it." The silence in the room was deafening. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Miles was staring at the letter, his mind clearly racing, trying to process everything. I stepped forward, my voice steady. "I'm not going to let you take this. Not this company, not the family. You're not going to rewrite Peter's story. You're not going to rewrite our legacy." He finally looked up, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something real in his eyes. Regret, fear, and maybe, just maybe, a hint of remorse. I took a deep breath. The hardest part was over. "I'm done, Miles," I said softly. "You can keep fighting, but I'm not giving up. Not this time." As I turned to walk out, I heard him speak, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Mom." I didn't turn around. I didn't need to hear it. The truth was clear, and I knew what I had to do. As I walked out of Peter's office for the last time, I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I had protected what Peter built. I had kept it safe, and for the first time in days, I felt like I could breathe again. Thank you for staying with me through this journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in Rose's shoes? Drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mabel's Stories for more gripping family tales that will keep you on the edge of your seat. You won't want to miss what's coming next.